much hype and hysteria whenever people talk about the impact of automation or robotics and AI or artificial intelligence on the BPO industry. But while we don't want to go into panic, we do need to take it seriously because after all, the BPO industry that we all worked together to build over the past 2 decades has created more than 1 million jobs and has generated $25 billion of revenue. So any threat to the jobs, any threat to this critical engine of our economic growth deserves our attention. However, in order to respond to the threat, we need to understand what's going on. We need to go beyond the fear. We need to go beyond the hype and really understand how exactly business processes are changing, how BPO jobs, the actual jobs that we're doing right now, are being remade, and so that we as an industry can understand how we can act rationally and not just respond, but actually lead the ongoing cognitive BPO revolution. But before I proceed any further, let me share my story. So Zoe said, I started out as a contact center agent. I grew up in this industry, like many of you. I was encashing hundreds of travelers' checks every day for e-telecare. And probably you don't even know what a traveler's check is. But after a year, I moved to IBM. I became a learning administrator. I was scheduling thousands and thousands of classes every month. And I took on many roles in HR outsourcing. I became an account partner. And right now, on my 11th role, I'm the delivery executive for our finance and procurement practice. But I don't really see myself just as a delivery leader. I see myself as a cognitive BPO executive. And the reason I share this with you, in line with what Alit was saying, you all need to have a growth mindset and be willing to restlessly reinvent ourselves, because that is what is needed in this current age of disruption. And I share this with you to let you know that I'm close enough to the process. In fact, it was not so long ago when I was doing it myself that I understand how exactly it's being changed. And as a leader in IBM, I'm privileged to have the driver's seat in actually leading some of the disruption that's happening. So what exactly is this age of digital disruption, what they call the VUCA world, or what we in IBM like to say as the cognitive era? This is the confluence of many technologies. It's robotic automation, analytics, AI or cognitive, blockchain, Internet of Things, but they're happening all at the same time. And they're changing business models and the very way we interact with each other. And the changes are so fundamental, they call it the fourth industrial revolution. You've heard the term mentioned earlier. Coming after steam in the 18th century, electricity, and computers. So, and we see this every day now. It's an everyday occurrence. Maybe you're just not aware. We've seen how Uber and Grab have totally transformed the transportation industry, creating value by giving all of us convenient mobility without even owning a single car. We've seen how Airbnb has transformed the hospitality industry without owning a single hotel room. And now we've seen Amazon disrupting big names such as Sears and Toys R Us through e-commerce and making Jeff Bezos the world's richest man. He's worth $130 billion, imagine that. In the meantime, its local version, Lazada, has been making me poorer every day as I receive text messages from Citibank saying someone other than myself just purchased the latest Japanese beauty cream. So disruption is happening, right? The question is, will IBPAP, will the Philippine BPO industry fall by the wayside? Or will we actually take the lead in this ongoing disruption? So change has arrived in the BPO industry. I'll talk about automation and AI. But we need to understand how specific processes are changing so we can respond rationally. So let's talk about automation first. So we need to take it with a grain of salt whenever consultants say an entire industry will be wiped out. All of the jobs will be taken away. what will happen is that there will be transactional tasks that are defined by clear steps that are usually high volume and does not require intensive judgment that are susceptible to automation. Okay? So we're talking about employee data changes in the HR space. We're talking about invoice processing, journal entries in finance and accounting. So anything of the copy and paste, download and upload variety, which we've all done in our entry-level jobs, will be candidates for automation. So, but what exactly do we mean by robots? When we talk about robotic process automation, does it mean that one day C3PO will come into the office and take the place of our seatmate and then start typing away at the computer? No, these are software robots. If you've ever worked with a macro, they're similar. So macros, are programmed to take certain steps. But the big difference is an RPA, is programmed, does not need to be triggered by a human being. You can program it so that 3 times a day it will check your email inbox and respond to a certain email from a certain person, right? So, and the reason RPA is becoming big right now is it's relatively easy and fast to implement. It takes weeks, not months to develop because it doesn't require any hard coding. What essentially does is it mimics what a human practitioner does on a computer screen. So let's make this real and show you a quick demonstration of a robot in production. So as you'll see here, the robot just logged in onto SAP using its own ID. This robot, we developed this for the payroll inputs process of one of our clients, a leading oil and gas company that's based in Europe. Many of you here in the room are HR managers, HR practitioners, so you must be familiar with payroll inputs. So these are essentially, elements of an employee's pay that may change from month to month. A great example would be sales incentives, or maybe a certain additional benefit deduction. What it's doing right now is it already took the spreadsheet from the workflow, essentially any email, could be Outlook, could be Zendesk, and it's now checking each employee ID one by one against the record in SAP. It's checking whether the employee is active, meaning is he eligible for this particular payroll input or deduction. It's doing that for the entire list on the file. And once it is able to validate that this employee is indeed eligible, it will start making the changes onto SAP, whether it's a sales incentive and so on. At the end of the process, it will generate an output file. It's an Excel sheet summarizing all the changes it has made and then listing all of the requests that could not be handled. So these are exceptions for whatever reason. So maybe the employee is no longer eligible or there was an error in the original input file. This robot was able to improve productivity by over 60%. This used to take 20 minutes, as done by a practitioner. It now takes less than 10 minutes. And it's able to handle 82% of all transactions. So only 18% become the exceptions. So to recap, if you're working on any process that's transactional, high volume, has clear steps, then it's a great candidate for robotic process automation. But automation does have a cost. It requires licensing and development costs. And typically, you need at least 2 FTEs worth of work to justify building a robot. So if you're sitting there imagining you can build a robot to automate those hundreds of leave approvals you're receiving, or you can automate a response to your pesky boss following up on you, not quite yet. So, but if you have, teams of people, maybe even hundreds of people doing very simple transactional work like I did, when all I did, as a learning practitioner was to get a spreadsheet and then copy and paste information on a class onto the learning management system, then these are great candidates for automation. But as you'll see on this chart, automation is just the beginning. The real value is when we combine automation with artificial intelligence or cognitive so that we build intelligent processes. These are processes that are smart and that learn over time. So this takes us to the idea of artificial intelligence, or what we in IBM call cognitive computing. It's not a primer on AI, so let me focus on a very simple definition and just one practical example during my talk. Before cognitive, every computer that you ever worked with was a programmable computer. That means it followed the if-then logic of a command. If certain parameters are met, then certain tasks will be taken by the computer, whether it's a simple addition or something more complex. A computer will do no more nor less than what it was programmed to do. However, we've entered the third era of computing, which is cognitive. In contrast, a cognitive system is a system that interacts in natural language, understands, reasons, and most importantly, learns. I don't know if any of you have heard about IBM Watson. Back in 2011, IBM Watson, a cognitive system, was trained to answer questions in natural language and was able to beat two of the best champions of the television show Jeopardy. And that was an early cognitive system. And now we've been working on cognitive systems even in the BPO space. The additional point I want to make about cognitive is that ordinary computers, in 1 or 2 years, they become obsolete. However, cognitive systems, as they interact thousands and millions of times, and as ingest more and more data, actually become more valuable. That is why data is now called the world's new natural resource, and why data security is very important. An IBM business value study indicates that 75% of all C-suite executives believe that their industry will be disrupted in the near future by AI or cognitive. So now let's take this back to the BPO industry. So how is this affecting our industry? A very simple example are what you are familiar with as chatbots. Okay? So chatbots or virtual agents are essentially AI or cognitive systems that interact directly with customers. And in some cases, they are what we call agent assist systems, when they interact with the contact center agent while he's performing a service. So now let me give you a demonstration of how this works, again, in the HR space. Let me introduce briefly our cognitive leader, Derek De Leon. Derek, please come forward. Derek is our cognitive leader in IBM. He also started as a contact center agent. Now he's a cognitive expert. So his manager, Divine, is here. He's my colleague in the talent and engagement practice. Guard Derek, there are many recruiters in the room. So let's show them how an HR inquiry is handled with the assistance of AI or a cognitive system. This is a very simple example. An employee is calling to ask that his address be changed in the records. First, Derek will show you how it works before AI. What an agent will do is go to the knowledge base and search change address. And as you'll see, it generated 44 results, and I think only 1 or 2 are even relevant. Now, let's show you how it works with cognitive. So he's going to type change address, and you will see the results. Not only is it relevant, it actually includes a video tutorial and a deep link that allows the agent to perform the transaction right there and then. So now he's going directly into Workday and he can perform the transaction right away. That means first contact resolution, right? And then see that he can actually ask the same question in multiple ways, right? So Watson, or our cognitive system, is smart enough to understand that modify employee residence has the same intent as change address. And then you will see that at the bottom, the agent is prompted to give feedback about the response. So what this means is really it's the agent who's training Watson to become better and better over time. So imagine after thousands of iterations, how smart the response will be and how relevant it will be. And then finally, if you ever work in the contact center or in any BPO company anyway, you know that periodically you will need to change your documentation, your knowledge base, because there will be a new policy, a new desktop procedure. And see how right now he's taking a sample FAQ in the travel and expense area. Maybe this company just transitioned to Concur. And you'll see that he'll just click on related QA, that button over there, and Watson already tells him there are potentially 31 questions that may be asked because of this document. And if he clicks on one question, it says there are 3 ways of asking this question, and this is the right response. So imagine all of the work you used to spend on converting a policy document into something useful in your knowledge base. It's done in less than 1 minute. So thank you so much, Derek, for that demonstration. So you can see the impact right away. It's superior customer experience because of AI. The agent is able to provide a faster and more relevant response. It's contextualized. There is a higher likelihood of first contact resolution and higher customer satisfaction. I can tell you, 13 years ago, I was a contact center agent, and it wasn't like that at all. I had to practically memorize the structure of the knowledge base, from the table of contents all the way to the most obscure policy material. Because if I didn't, I had to put the caller on hold for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, God forbid, 5 minutes. And then I was certain to miss my average handle time target, which was typically 7 minutes. So what was the result? A poor customer experience. So what's happening right now is that automation and AI are really empowering our practitioners to provide delightful customer experiences. So that's all great for the customer, right? So what happens now? Are we doomed? Let's go back to the question. Are we doomed to lose our leadership in the BPO industry as robots start taking over back office processing work and as chatbots start taking over contact center work? In the area of automation, as we said earlier, robots will definitely take routine tasks that are simple. Robots are simply faster, and they make fewer errors. Robots are never subject to fatigue. They will never take a sick leave, real or make-believe, as we all know in HR, right? So, and you never ask for a medical certificate, right? So, but if you think about it, that's not all we do. In fact, that's not even the majority of things that we do in the BPO industry. Because someone still has to interact with the client to understand his needs and receive feedback. Someone has to assess a process to say which ones are ripe for automation. Someone has to work with the developer to build and test the robot. Someone has to maintain the robot, especially when there are process changes. Someone has to manage the workforce of the future, composed on the one hand of robots and on the other human practitioners. In other words, we still need human beings to empathize with the customer, to apply critical thinking and problem-solving skills, to collaborate with other people so we can get things done. So, in fact, I think I will speak for many people when many of our entry-level practitioners when I say that what this is doing is actually enabling many of us to move away from the robotic drudgery that characterizes much of our work into more high-value creative work. After all, many of our workforce are highly educated college graduates and would welcome the chance to use critical thinking and judgment in their daily work. I certainly did not enjoy copying and pasting thousands of classes back when I was learning a practitioner, and I did not look forward to retiring with that job. That's why I got myself promoted as fast as I can, in my 11 years with IBM. So, what about AI? What happens? If you think about it, if you have a cognitive system, who else can better train a cognitive system than an agent who's had experiences with thousands of transactions? And a chatbot will handle level 1 and level 2 simple transactions. There will always be level 3, complex ones. Who else but a human being with experience, expertise, and most importantly, empathy can handle a level 3 transaction, by which time you can bet your customer is probably frustrated and irate, right? So that's where we can take advantage of our much vaunted cultural trait of empathy or malasakit, and it can remain our competitive advantage. In fact, the same study I cited earlier indicates that 68% of executives believe that organizations will focus less on products but more on customer experiences in order to differentiate their companies. So, as you can see, I have a hopeful view of what's going on. I do not see this as a case of man versus machine, with machines ultimately taking over. I see it as a case of man working with machine to create value and better experiences. I see AI as augmenting, not replacing, the intelligence of our human practitioners as we take out the robotic work out of them and as we restore the humanity of our practitioners. So let me end with a call to action. Make no mistake, I'm not dismissing the enormity of the challenges ahead of us. In any revolution, there's much destruction, but there can also be a lot of renewal and creation, and we need to begin with our workforce. It's very clear we need to upskill and reskill our workforce. To begin with, every student and every employee needs to understand at least the basics of automation, artificial intelligence, but also analytics and blockchain. But as you've heard earlier, it's not so much about the technical skills. We actually need to shift our focus on the soft skills that make us human. I'm talking about empathy, creativity, collaboration, the very skills. In other words, we need to double down on the very skills that made us the leading voice destination in the world to begin with. Because in a world where humans collaborate alongside with robots and cognitive systems, it is the countries and companies that can make them work together effectively to create value and excellent customer experiences that will win the cognitive BPO revolution. But we must understand the technology, and that's what I hope I'm doing right now, so that we can begin to embrace the technology and have the confidence to implement it and enter the cognitive era. This is not the first time technology has caused disruption in history. When the Industrial Revolution happened, so many people left the farms, went into the cities as factories were set up. And as factories became mechanized, productivity increased, prices ultimately went down, demand was boosted, and so many more jobs were created in the services industry. This time is no different. For some people, the transition will be painful. But for many, and I hope many of you are in this room, who have a growth mindset and have the willingness to learn the skills of the cognitive era, this will be fruitful, and this will be exciting, in fact. Filipinos the world over are known for our empathy, our creativity, our resilience. But now we must draw upon our history also of ingenuity and adaptability. On a personal level, I shared with you how I had to restlessly reinvent myself and adapt so that I evolved from a contact center agent to a cognitive executive. But this has happened so many times in our history, as when our ancestors rode the balangay to colonize the islands of the Pacific, as when the tribes of the Cordillera reshaped entire mountainsides into a stairway to heaven, as when the shipbuilders of the Philippines built galleons that crossed the Pacific during the Manila-Acapulco trade, which essentially started globalization. We too are in an important moment when we need to apply our ingenuity and adaptability to reimagine a world where humans work alongside with robots and cognitive systems so that we can build a cognitive BPO. So to answer the question, are we doomed to become irrelevant and lose our leadership in the BPO industry? I think the answer is pretty clear. If we embrace the technology, if we grow and upskill our workforce, and if we double down on our cultural trait of customer centricity, I have no doubt at all that not only are we going to avoid irrelevance, we are going to lead the cognitive BPO revolution. Thank you.